What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, we are checking out the new Samsung Galaxy A56. Now, here's the deal with this phone. This is the top-tier device in Samsung's A series, their budget and mid-range lineup, RIP to the A70-somethings, and it tends to be really popular. So popular, in fact, that Samsung would kind of prefer if you didn't buy it because, well, it's a heck of a lot cheaper than an S series or an FE, but it's just as good. Because of that, last year, the A55 didn't come to the US. This year, this A56 is maybe coming to the US someday, one day, but I already smuggled this one in just for you guys. Now, there's a few new things with this A56 that you should know about. A new design, a new processor, way faster charging, and some intelligence features that aren't AI, but are kind of AI. Before we get into all that, let's just quickly unbox it, and then I'll fill you in on everything you need to know. So ripping off those stickers there and sliding off the lid, the first thing we get is the phone itself looking all pretty in pink. And you guys know that the bottom half of the box contains a whole bunch of nothing nowadays, but stuck inside the lid, that's where you'll find the extras or accessories, if you want to call them that. There's a SIM ejector tool, and then I had a doozy of a time trying to get the rest of the junk out of this cardboard packet. This is me actually struggling in real time. I've unboxed a lot of Samsung phones in my day, but something was not quite right here because I had to yank the USB-C cable free and the whole package was a bit mangled. But there you go, a fat stack of paperwork that's totally and completely necessary, I'm sure, and the USB-C cable that did not want to see the light of day. We'll get this new A56 fully unwrapped here and powered on. And the first thing I do want to clarify is availability and pricing. So this new A56 is available globally right now, Europe, Asia, Latin America, but for the US, Samsung says they'll be launching this phone later this year with no concrete date or even a general timeline. Price-wise, Samsung did say it'll be $499 for the US, and everywhere else, it's between $400-ish and $500-ish, depending on the various currency conversions. And actually, third-party retailers are already selling this phone on places like Amazon for under $450. I'll leave a couple links down below in the video description if you want to check those, but the price for this A56 is a bit wonky and you'll see some discrepancies. At a glance, this new phone definitely looks like all the old Samsung phones you've probably been using for years. At least from the front it does. The screen size is now 6.7 inches, so you get an extra 1/10 of an inch over last year that mainly comes from slightly slimmer bezels and a higher screen-to-body ratio. And fun fact, every 2025 A-series phone, the ones that end in 6, they're all 6.7 inches, so this is your only size choice. Both the front and back are now Gorilla Glass Victus Plus, so a strong, newer, premium glass build paired to an all-aluminum frame. And two other things I noticed right away, this new A56 is 15 grams lighter than last year's A55 and nearly a full millimeter thinner. That weight and size difference doesn't sound like a lot, but you'd be surprised how immediately you feel that. The other thing that's different, obviously, the camera module. This is the refreshed triple camera design that's graced the A56, the A36, and A26, and I don't know that I'm a huge fan of it. On the one hand, the camera setup as a whole is smaller, but this black one-piece lens cover really makes it all stand out. And it has this weird gap that kind of makes you want to stick a blade in there and yank it off. It's also now an inconsistent design with the S series and the FE. And as strange as this sounds, I think some people appreciated getting an S series looking device for a fraction of the cost. Now, unless next year's S series phones look like this, everyone will kind of notice you have an odd or different Samsung smartphone. Also, I am a pretty big fan of this light shade of pink. It's not quite a metallic holographic finish. It's a pretty consistent light pink shade. But if you don't like this, there's also olive, graphite, and light gray. Taking a quick look around here, there's nothing on the left side of the phone, obviously. On the right, you've got familiar volume and power buttons, a couple microphone holes up top, and at the bottom, the USB-C charge port, main loudspeaker, and the SIM card tray. And this shouldn't be new news, but I'll say it again anyway. No micro SD card support on this phone, just a couple physical SIM SIM options, and eSIM. There are a few configuration choices: 128 or 256 gigabytes of storage, 6, 8, and even 12 gigabytes of RAM. Those higher spec options, though, are sometimes tough to find, and I have a feeling, similar to the A36 that I just unboxed, that this A56 will most likely be sold at a lower spec to just about everyone. There's the selfie camera, of course, front and center below the secondary loudspeaker, and around back, like you saw, that triple camera setup. This phone does retain its in-display fingerprint sensor, which seems to be perfectly fine. It's still not the flagship ultrasonic one, so it's not as fast. If you're used to that, you still gotta tap and hold a bit, but it's fine, and there's face unlock you can use as well. As for the viewing experience, Samsung only changed, or improved actually, one aspect here. Aside from the 1/10 of an inch of extra screen real estate, very, very valuable, you've got the same Super AMOLED panel at the same full HD 2340 by 1080 resolution and the same 120Hz adaptive refresh rate. What's changed is the brightness. We go from 1000 nits of user-controlled brightness to 1200 nits and up to 1900 nits of peak auto brightness. Interestingly, that's the same addition as what the A36 got, which is a welcome change for sure. It reduces the glare, it's better for outside viewing, but the screens between this A56 and the lower tier A36 I do believe are exactly the same, so you don't get anything more here, and it's still not the same AMOLED panel or the same brightness levels as the flagship S series. Still, this is a great screen at a great price, and I don't think anyone is going to notice or care that it doesn't match the S25. In fact, I think this is still one of the better screens you can buy for under $500, and it continues to be a great reason to consider this phone specifically. I know a lot of other mid-range devices, especially the gaming-focused ones, are pushing things further, but this is the right balance of usable specs that appeals to the everyday Joe and the spec-conscious techie. And I don't think there's much more that Samsung could have even changed to make this noticeably better. Also, cover your ears, because even though I don't think the dual speaker setup has improved or otherwise been changed, I'm still going to give you an awkward audio sample anyway for the 2 people who like to hear it. So now we come to the elephant in the room, or more specifically, the Exynos in the phone. This A56 is powered by Samsung's own new and improved Exynos 1580 chip, paired to their Eclipse 1540 GPU. This processor was announced in October of last year, but this is the first Samsung smartphone to have it, and big reveal, here are the Geekbench scores, so you can start doing some comparisons. Now, obviously, I literally just yanked this phone out of the box. I've had it for only a few hours, so I'm not going to make any outright claims on this phone's performance just yet, and I think actually we all can make this a group effort here to put this new processor to the test and see if maybe Exynos can shake off that bad reputation. To Samsung's credit, this processor is like new. It's a big upgrade over the Exynos 1480, built on a new node with double the GPU hardware and a new design, a new architecture. Samsung is making some big claims too: 37% better maximum performance and 20% better sustained performance, and support for specs that this phone doesn't even have, like 144Hz screen and 200 megapixel cameras. These massive changes lead me to believe that this chip, or a future version of it, could grace a lot of smartphones and perhaps tablets and maybe other devices for years to come. So it'll be really interesting to see how this phone actually performs, and you can bet we're going to be doing some speed performance tests with all sorts of other devices. Now, in addition to the physical components being upgraded, the software experience gets a refresh too, at least for those of you not already on One UI 7 yet. You get Android 15 out of the box and 6 years of Android OS and security updates. Nowadays, people seem to be keeping their phones that long, so it's a generous support lifespan. And since AI is just the buzzword for the whole world right now, we also should talk about that too. But shockingly, there's actually no AI on this phone, at least not the Galaxy AI that's a major feature on the flagships. These higher tier A series phones this year just get intelligence features, or awesome intelligence, as Samsung puts it, and it's just a handful of quite useful add-ons like AI select and the object eraser for photos and photo filters and read aloud, but that's kind of it. So actually, if you're anti-AI, this might be the phone for you. I've always felt that the A series devices should be the simple, familiar Android or Samsung phones that most people would prefer, and that's especially true this year with this software. Samsung took a pretty big swing at the charging speeds for this A56 as well. They did not add wireless charging, unfortunately, but its familiar 5,000 mAh battery can be juiced up via the USB-C plug at up to 45 watts now, which will get you from 0 to 100% in just over an hour. You just have to go out and buy a 45 watt wall adapter yourself, which I would highly recommend since you kind of paid for this upgraded charging feature anyway, so you may as well utilize it. And finally, those cameras around back that sort of look like they've morphed into one, well, although they physically do look different, kind of, the hardware underneath seems to be the same as last year. You get a 50 megapixel f1.8 aperture main lens, a 12 megapixel 123 degree ultra wide shooter, and a 5 megapixel macro for up close pics. The selfie camera, oddly enough, went from a 32 megapixel lens to a 12 megapixel lens on this phone, though I know megapixels aren't everything. And inside the camera app, well, to be quite honest, the camera doesn't seem like it was much of a focus for this phone. So aside from the couple of intelligence features for photos I mentioned earlier, there's not much that's new functionally. I think this camera setup as a whole is still perfectly fine for what you pay for. I mean, no one is going to complain except for maybe the 10x zoom. That could be better. And you don't really need a macro lens nowadays. What I did notice, though, just taking a few pictures right out of the box, is that the selfie camera, by default, is very vibrant and colorful, while the rear camera setup, with no filters or settings changed, is oddly dull for a Samsung phone. It's missing that punchy, colorful, saturated look. But aside from that, like I said, this is a perfectly fine camera setup for the average person to capture special events and fun moments, and who isn't going to use this for any major professional work. All things considered, this new A56 isn't the most radically upgraded phone, no smartphone is nowadays, but the improvements with the performance and charging speeds and screen kind of continue inching it closer and closer to a flagship phone while still retaining a much more friendly price tag. I'm curious this year, especially if Samsung does bring this phone to the US, what sort of response we'll see. I have no doubt this phone will be popular yet again, but I do wonder if maybe the A36 is the phone to get this year, since they do seem very similar. But what do you guys think? Is the A56 going to be your new device? Did you grab one already? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, of course. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.